Calamari Salutations everyone, Squee here bringing you the power rankings for the week 4 of the YCL. It's been a minute, I know, but we're gonna make up for the videos that we are late on, and this one was the one that we took a break on, so we have to catch up for that. And please enjoy the memes, they are late memes. A lot of things have gone up since the matches actually occurred, but I'll try to make my best to still remember what I thought about the power rankings from this week. So, shall we? We have a new team. I mentioned in my clean sweep video that the Endor Teddy Ursas had to drop out of the league due to personal reasons. And taking their place is Coach Batmac of the Sacramento Sandslashes. Some changes to the team, namely Alolan Persian, Runerigas, Eldegoss, and Nidoking and Blastoise. And the one that I decided to highlight was actually the Blastoise, because I think Blastoise is a really good pick in a draft league. It can do basically anything from setup to bulky and hazard removal, so I think it's a phenomenal pick, and I'm looking forward to see how the Sacramento Sandslash is able to utilize the Blastoise. At number 15 we have the Cold Summer Assassins. They lost a 2-0 defeat against the 3 Electrons, and this was the Pikachu match, and Pikachu went ham on Souza. And since Souza didn't win, I couldn't honestly justify him putting him higher in the standings. He did play quite good with the Salamence. The Salamence did try to mount some sort of resistance against the enemy team, but I think there was a crucial mistake where he stayed in front of the Pikachu with the Cramorant. And at that point I think that you always want to attack the Pikachu. Pikachu is very frail, it can almost get KO'd from basically any attack, and so if you were already sacking the Cramorant or predicting a switch, I think it was still better to hit whatever came in, and then possibly later defog if it was something that was defoggable. And yeah, that's basically it. There's not much to say about this match. Souza got murdered by that Pikachu, and unfortunately he stays at the last spot of the standings because of that. Next we go to the commissioner himself, Sen. He stands at number 14 this week, and the truth is Sen just hasn't had that much of a good performance as we came to know him this season. He lost this week against Jamie, the Brisbane Rillaboomers, and that Aromatisse just kind of sat there in front of the enemy team for Sen. That's actually his team, and that was very unfortunate because Sen really didn't have a great answer against Aromatisse. That said, I think there's some things that he could have done better, namely Plasma Fisting the Aromatisse when the Zero Aura came in first, because that Aromatisse was definitely a detriment to your team, and you just want to hit it as hard as possible, and without compromising the Zapdos, Zero Aura was actually the best way to do that. And because you didn't use the Plasma Fist at that point of the match, the Brisbane Rillaboomers managed to gain momentum, and later down the match that meant that you had to basically trade the Zapdos for the Aromatisse, and when the Zapdos was gone, nothing resisted the close combat from the Mienshao, and that meant that Mienshao just ran wild and nothing you could do at that point. So I still like to see the Octillery. The Octillery was really fun to see how the way it was utilized, and I'm hoping that Sen will manage to treat us with these kinds of great sets and great Pokemon that are on his team and people don't often think about them. Moving on, against the Philadelphia Melmetals at number 13, and they had a very professional match that was a nail-biter. Until the end, they lost just closely to the Rustboro City Rejects 1-0. And the Clefable was really good for Cherry this match, because that Clefable was able to tank so many hits for the enemy team and stop the enemy team from setting up. And unfortunately, that match just came down to that Victini with the sliver of HP not having the necessary coverage for KOing the Urshifu with one hit. It was really unfortunate, and basically it was a pre-game decision that ended up biting you in the butt. But that's Pokemon also. We learn from these kinds of mistakes, and I'm confident that you will be able to eventually get your win. I don't know when, but we'll see. It's coming. I feel it. In the 12th spot, it pains me to say that the Miami Hitmore and Aldra are filling in this spot. But the thing is, Aldra is currently 1-3, and because of that I can't really justify putting him higher on the standings. He also did make a really crucial mistake this match, where he didn't, like close combat or Darkest Lariat the Darmanitan way earlier than he should have, because the Darmanitan was slower than the Zarude. So since the Zarude was scarfed, it could revenge the Rosalia. I think it was the thing that had been KO'd the turn before. And instead of that, Aldra tried to make the Primarina try and resist a hit from the Darmanitan, which didn't work, so the Zarude had to come out after that. But the damage was already done. Bismi had already claimed his spot on the battle, clenched the win with both hands, and Aldra was just sent packing this week. There was no other way to put it. Aldra really was trashed this week, and I'm looking to him to bounce back, because from what I saw in the first week, he's definitely a terrific battler, and he can have a great prepping ability, and I'm looking on him to be more consistent with that level of performance that he showed us on the first week. So at the 11th spot we have Arts and the Rustboro City Rejects, the other half of the very professional match. And I like the way that Arts decided to use the hazard stacking in favor of him, because of the hazard stacking, the Dredigon, stayed on the field much less time than it should have. So I really like the Toxic Spikes bring here. And at the end, that end game where the Urshifu was just cleaning house was really beautiful to see. There was even time for the Dracozole to bring some heat to the match and just Meteor Beam the Pokemon that stood in front of it, which I don't remember who was. And yeah, the thing is, even though Arts had a really good plan in the battle, he ultimately only won because the opponent made a mistake in prep, or made a bad decision in prep. So that's why he dropped off a few spots this week. In the 10th place we have Empire Sharky and the 6th Street Viper, and they lost 4-0 against the champion, Sally Mumble. And when you go against the champion, it's always a tough matchup, but I did like to see that Zapdos really putting in work. The Zapdos is honestly the MVP for Sharky this season. It has put in so much work in so much of their matches, and honestly the Barraskewda has been paling in comparison to the Zapdos. Some sneaky stuff going there with the Tyrantrum, trying to set up against the Austin Taurus, and the Austin Taurus, I believe, are known for having a weak spot in Tyrantrum. Unfortunately, the Tyrantrum wasn't enough to bring the match home for the 6th Street Survivor, and yeah, that's ultimately why they lost. Also, kind of a questionable decision when the Piloswine was in front of the Rotom, and the Rotom just pressed Rising Voltage. And after this Cavalier died, you just brought in the Palossand again, and the Palossand was further chipped from the rocks. And since you had Rindo Berry, I think the best decision was actually to try and stay in, because that way you probably survive the hit. I don't know, because I haven't calced it, because I don't know the sets, but yeah, Zapdos stayed in on the field a very long time, spamming Hurricanes against the opponent, and unfortunately at the end of the battle the Dragonite just set up and eventually cleaned house. One question, did the Meowstic have screens? Because if it did, it could have set up the screens before the Dragonite got to KO so many things. So that was probably another opportunity for improvement there, but I'm not really sure if it had the correct screens for stopping the Dragonite, so I won't fault you much for that. In the 9th spot we have the Brisbane Real Boomers with just JH, and they put on a really good performance this week with 2 key sets that managed to render Sen basically way down on the dispute of the match. The first set was the full defensive Aromatisse, very good, basically walled off almost all of Sen's team, and Sen really did struggle to get through that Aromatisse. The way he did it was trading off the Zapdos for the Aromatisse, but that just opened up the house for Mian Shao to clean up everything that was on the opponent's field. So really good game plan, really good execution on the match. 2 key sets that showed a really consistent, a really strong and secure performance. So I'm definitely looking to more performances like this. So next up we have Bravez and the Nashville New Kings at number 8. The thing about the match from Bravez this week is that he really got out-prepped by his opponent, and I think he only made a really crucial mistake, which was setting up with the Copperajah at that point of the match, because the Copperajah was basically the only thing stopping the Tapu Lele from switching in and cleaning up. So once the Copperajah was low HP, basically Bravez had no answer for the Tapu Lele. He wasn't faster than it, the priority users were rendered useless because of the Psychic terrain, and yeah, there was not much that he could have done at that point. That said, he did play the match quite well, I'd say. That offensive Landorus was honestly a treat to watch, because Landorus offensively was really good on this match, and I think Bravez really showed off what it was capable of doing in this match, so props to him on that one. But he's now 2-2, and that's why he fell 3 more spots this week. And at number 7 we have the other side of the matchup. So Seiden sits at number 7 this week, sitting also with that 2-2 score. And the thing that went really well for Seiden this week was actually his preparation. He was on point with his items. The Lumberry for the Heatran was really good to stop the Spore from the Mungus. And like I said, on Brave's team, once that Copperaja went low enough, that meant that the Tapu Lele just came in and claimed KOs every time. Basically nothing resisted the Tapu Lele Psychic on the enemy team besides that Copperaja, so a really well executed game plan with that Celebi recovering and earth powering the Copperaja to chip it down low enough. And yeah, a good match from Seiden. He's been a little bit hit and miss this season, so I'm expecting him to try and be more consistent with his good performances. Next, in the 6th spot this week, we have none other than Ash Ketchum that utilized his Pikachu to just wreck an enemy team. And honestly, I haven't seen Pikachu so well utilized in draft before, and it was a treat to watch. The Pikachu just went ham on Souza. Souza had nothing for it. That fake out into extreme speed combination was deadly, even though Souza had an Intimidate Salamence. It basically was capable of KOing the Salamence from 50% HP, which is insane to think about from such a frail looking mon as Pikachu. So props to Sven for pulling off that amazing win. And Sven has been improving steadily his performance throughout the weeks. So since he's going to face the champion next, I'm really looking forward to see how that match goes. In the 5th spot, we have Lucas and the Hellblaze Volcaronas, and they lost this week, their first loss of the season against the Immunity Idols. There were some out-of-game decisions that I don't agree with. I don't agree with the Entei not coming to this match because the Entei applied so much pressure on the enemy team and also prevented the enemy team from applying pressure on the removers that you had. I did like to see the Quagsire. I think the Quagsire was honestly a really good bring this match because it could just sit up in front of the enemy team for a really long time. Monte did have a plan up his sleeve like he always does, but that wasn't enough to stop the Quagsire from still doing quite a lot on the match. And I was really impressed by the way that you were down 2-4, but the match was still pretty close with the double and the Quagsire alone against 4 enemy mons. And only when the Quagsire went down was the path really open for the Immunity Idols to win the match. So good resistance mounted on that way, even at a disadvantage. So props to you for mounting that resistance. And let's see what the future brings for this week, for this team. Probably they, from their consistent performance on their first weeks, I'd say they are definitely capable of bouncing back next week. And in the number 4 spot, we have the team that actually beat Lucas. So we have Monte with his Immunity Idols. That's Silvally normal. You don't see it much, but it was really good to watch. The reason for the Silvally normal was actually to have Assault Vest to face off against the Dragapult, which I agree with. It's a really good decision there for Monte. And Silvally has such insane coverage, and it basically had perfect coverage for the enemy team with Surf, Grass Pledge, and Flamethrower. Everything was hit on the enemy team. The Ice Beam for good measure on the Dragapult. So insane coverage from the Silvally, and it applied so much pressure on Lucas that Lucas really had few answers left for this Silvally set. So props to Monte, he played really good. The match wasn't really won until the Quagsire went down, so he managed to stay cool even though to cool off his head, even though he had the numbers advantage in the late stages of the match. So he maintained the necessary composure to grant him that really crucial win against the #1 spot on his division. So this division is now really wide open as to who will get the bye weeks. So in the #3 spot we have Bismi with his Trash Town Thieves and Snowman Go Brew. That's basically the story of the match. Nice way of setting up with the substitutes, the belly drum to proc the Salak Berry, really well thought out from Bismi, and yeah, from there Darmanitan could just wreck faces, and you don't really expect the Zen mode Darmanitan out of a match. So props to Bismi for really utilizing Darmanitan at the full extent of his capabilities, and that's basically the one reason that I justify picking Darmanitan, because otherwise it can be quite one-dimensional. So I approve of the Zen mode Darmanitan. That's basically the story of the match. Really cool-headed thinking at the end of the match to preserve the differentials, so nice one on that part of the match also. And yeah, please continue to impress me, Bismi. I'll look forward to it. So in the #2 spot we have a team that's actually not undefeated. It has been defeated in the first week, but I think it has been more consistent at Bismi, which is the Cerulean City Mewtwo, coached by Mr. Luke Harry himself. The Mew once again put in so much work against the enemy team. In the late stages of the match, once that Excelgor wasn't in front of the Mew just started setting up the cosmic powers, and the rest was history. The team really did take advantage from the lack of other coverage from the Latios, and that gave way too many turns for the Mewtwo setup. And since when this Mew setup, he sure went ham, cleaning up the rest of the enemy team. That said, Luke did have some struggles at the beginning of the match. Mainly that Excelgor with the specs was really cool to see from Fuego. The thing is that Latios just gave Luke so much momentum on the match to set up with the Mew, and that's basically the reason that Fuego lost that match. It was because of the momentum he gave Mew to set up. In the #1 spot, to nobody's surprise, we still have the Austin Torres and Sally Mumble. So Sally did it again with the setup at the end of the match. This time it was the Dragonite, and Dragonite is an excellent setup mon. Extreme speed was basically what was needed for this specific match. The Dragonite did clean up the late game, but the Rotom Mo was really important in the mid game part, where it managed to KO this Cavalier, KO the Palossand, and still burn the Tyrantrum, which otherwise would have run amok in the match. So props to Sally for designing a really exquisite set for the Rotom specifically for this match, and he's been a really good performer. Sally has been a really good performer throughout all of the season, and this week changes nothing, so everyone else is still trying to catch up to him. So this is what the standings look like this week. The Sydney 6 is actually the biggest rise of the week, and the Austin Torres still sits in the top of the power rankings. And in the later stages of the rankings, we have the Brisbane Real Boomers leading out the charge in the 9th spot, and the Cold Summer Assassin still at the bottom of the teams that are actually ranked. So this is the power rankings for this week. I apologize for the late upload, but I will now try to catch up on uploads during this week. Thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to leave a like on the video, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you on the next one. Squid jetting out.